Betrayal cuts deeper when it comes from the flesh and blood you raised. I spent 39 years in this four-bedroom colonial on Oak Street in Naperville, Illinois, loving a woman who made these walls feel like a heartbeat. I didn't know that 2 years after opening my doors to my son, I'd be sitting in an ER getting 6 stitches across my forehead, listening to him tell me it was my fault his wife threw a wine glass at my face. My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 68 years old, a retired civil engineer who spent decades building solid foundations for roads and bridges across DuPage County. But the most important structure I ever maintained was my home. My late wife, Eleanor, was the soul of this place. She picked out the warm cream paint, laid down the hardwood rugs, and planted the bright blue hydrangeas along the front porch that still bloom every June like clockwork, stubborn, radiant, and enduring, just like she was. Eleanor died 3 years ago from a sudden brain aneurysm on a quiet Tuesday morning. One moment she was setting down a cup of tea, the next she was gone. No warning, no final conversation, no chance to hold her hand one last time. After her funeral, the house fell into an unbearable hollow quiet. It was the kind of heavy silence where you catch yourself talking out loud in an empty kitchen just to hear a human voice. So when my 37-year-old son Julian called me on a cold Tuesday evening in February, his voice laced with anxiety, I listened eagerly. He asked if he and his wife of 5 years, Vanessa, could come over to talk. I set out fresh coffee mugs before they even pulled into the driveway, just grateful for some life under my roof. When they sat down at my dining table, Julian kept his head down, staring into his black coffee like a ashamed schoolboy. He told me that rent in their downtown Chicago apartment complex had spiked to $2,400 a month. Between parking fees and living expenses, they were bleeding cash and couldn't save a single penny toward a down payment for a home of their own. Vanessa jumped in smoothly, her tone rehearsed to perfection. She assured me they only needed 12 to 18 months tops to build up their savings account. Looking at my lonely 4-bedroom home, I thought to myself, what's the harm? This is my son. I smiled, squeezed Julian's shoulder, and told them that Oak Street had always been his home and the doors were wide open. Vanessa threw her arms around my neck, teary-eyed, calling me their absolute lifesaver. By late February, a U-Haul truck was parked crooked in my driveway. I helped Julian haul heavy mattress frames up the stairs, feeling a long-lost warmth return to my chest. The house had sounds again, footsteps in the hallway, the low murmur of the television downstairs, the aroma of roasting coffee in the morning. But that warmth didn't last past the first thaw of spring. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the home I had built for 40 years stopped belonging to me. It started with small, calculated intrusions. On a damp Thursday afternoon in March, I walked into the living room and noticed that Eleanor's delicate ceramic angel figurines, a collection she had lovingly curated over 20 years that sat on the fireplace mantel, were gone. When I asked Vanessa where they were, she didn't even look up from her laptop. She casually mentioned that she had packed those dusted old things into a cardboard box and shoved them up into the attic, claiming they were cluttering the room and ruining her modern aesthetic. I swallowed my pride, telling myself not to pick fights over knickknacks, but Vanessa didn't stop at the mantel. By April, she had completely reorganized my kitchen cabinets. She moved my heavy cast-iron skillets to the bottom shelves, forcing me to bend my bad hip painfully every time I wanted to fry an egg, while her air fryers and juicers dominated the counters where Eleanor used to roll out pie crusts. She criticized how I boiled pasta and commented on my daily schedule as if I were a teenager missing curfew. Whenever I tried to set gentle boundaries, Julian would instantly cut in from the sofa, frowning at me. "Come on, Dad, she's just trying to modernize the house. Don't be so difficult." In the house I paid off back in 2008. Then came a rainy afternoon in early May when I was retrieving the mail from the curb. Tucked inside a stack of junk flyers was a brightly colored envelope from a major collection agency, stamped in red ink, addressed directly to Vanessa. I didn't mean to pry, but as I smoothed out the wet paper, the window pane revealed the terrifying truth. A formal 30-day demand notice for an unpaid credit card debt totaling over $35,000. I stood by the mailbox in the cold Illinois drizzle, staring at the 5-figure sum amassed entirely from luxury department stores and online boutiques. A massive debt accrued long before she ever set foot in my home, completely hidden from my son. I slipped the letter onto the foyer table without a word, watching her quickly snatch it up and hide it in her purse 10 minutes later. That was the moment I realized Vanessa wasn't a desperate young woman trying to save for a family home. She was a runaway train hiding behind my generosity, and Julian was too blind to see the track running out. The illusion of helping my son save for his future didn't shatter in a grand shouting match. It fell apart on a frigid Thursday evening while I was carrying a heavy black garbage bag out to the curb. The blue plastic recycling bin sat beside the garage, its lid propped open by a stack of oversized cardboard boxes. As I reached down to secure the lid against the damp April wind, something bright and glossy caught the beam of the porch light. I reached into the bin and pulled out a thick, full-color brochure folded inside an official confirmation envelope. Printed across the top in bold gold lettering was a booking receipt for a Royal Caribbean 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruise, confirmed for a high-tier oceanfront balcony suite. Tucked directly beneath the travel itinerary was a crisp receipt from an upscale department store in Oak Brook, a $900 charge for a designer Coach leather tote bag, paid in full just 3 days prior. I stood motionless on the cold asphalt of my driveway, the damp wind stinging my face, holding those 2 pieces of paper in my trembling hands. A balcony suite, a designer handbag, all paid for while I covered the heating bills, paid the property taxes, and let them live rent-free under my roof so they could get back on their feet. A sudden, ice-cold clarity washed over me. They weren't bleeding cash because of high Chicago rents. They were bleeding cash because they refused to curb their appetite for luxury. I was never their lifesaver. I was never a bridge to their first home. I was just a free financial subsidy, a convenient shelter that allowed them to live like high rollers while an old man paid for their electricity and swept their porch. I didn't confront them that night. I slipped the receipts back into the bin, walked upstairs to my bedroom, and sat in Eleanor's old armchair in the dark, listening to the muffled sounds of their laughter echoing from the living room below. Something inside my chest, a deep reservoir of patience I had carried for 2 years, turned into cold, unyielding stone. By Easter Sunday, I tried one last time to hold on to the spirit of what a family was supposed to be. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, long before the sun peeked over the rooftops of Oak Street. I rolled up my sleeves and went to work in the kitchen, desperate to recreate the warmth Eleanor used to bring to every holiday. By 9 in the morning, the house smelled of honey-glazed spiral ham studded with cloves, scalloped potatoes bubbling in cream, and roasted garlic green beans. I wiped the flour from my hands, looked at the set dining table, and told myself that despite everything, this was still my home, and today was a day for peace. Julian came downstairs around 10, giving me a brief, hesitant hug and remarking that the ham smelled just like the meals his mother used to make. For 5 fleeting minutes, it felt like the old days. Then Vanessa walked into the dining room, her smartphone glued to her palm, her face cold and unreadable. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees instantly. We made it 20 minutes into dinner with polite, strained small talk. Then, as I reached for the gravy boat, Vanessa set her silver fork down against her porcelain plate with a sharp, deliberate click that cut right through the conversation. Arthur, we need to discuss the upstairs arrangement," Vanessa said, her voice completely devoid of warmth. "My parents' landlord in Wheaton just raised their monthly rent by $300. They're on a fixed income and they can't afford it. So Julian and I decided they're moving into the 2 empty bedrooms upstairs at the beginning of next month." I froze, setting the gravy boat down on the tablecloth. "Excuse me? They're moving in," she repeated slowly, enunciating each word as if she were speaking to a child. "You have 2 full guest rooms sitting up there doing absolutely nothing. It's the logical solution." I looked from Vanessa to my son. Julian was staring intently at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. "Vanessa, I sympathize with your parents' situation," I said, keeping my voice as level as a spirit level. "But this is my home. I opened my doors to you and Julian so you could save for a house. I am 68 years old, and I am not turning my late wife's home into a multi-generational boarding house. I will not take on 2 more full-time residents." Vanessa's face instantly flushed with anger. "Are you serious? You have 2 empty rooms sitting there wasting space while my parents are about to be priced out of their apartment, and you're worrying about your peace and quiet?" "Yes, Vanessa, I am," I replied firmly. "I paid off this mortgage 16 years ago, and I am entitled to peace in my own house." That was when Vanessa reached into her leather handbag on the floor, pulled out a stapled, multi-page document, and slapped it onto the white tablecloth right beside the platter of ham. "Well, it doesn't matter what you prefer, Arthur, because it's already arranged," she sneered, pointing a manicured nail at the signature line. "I already drafted a formal residential lease agreement. I had my parents sign it yesterday. They're going to pay $600 a month directly to me for those 2 upstairs rooms to cover their utility share. It's settled." I stared at the paper in absolute disbelief. She had drafted a lease for my real estate, signed by her parents, intending to collect monthly rent on rooms she didn't own, turning my dead wife's home into her personal cash cow rental property. "You drafted a lease for my house?" I asked, my voice dropping into a deadly whisper. "You bargained away my bedrooms without my knowledge? Somebody has to make practical decisions around here," Vanessa snapped, standing up so fast her chair scraped hard against the hardwood floor. "Eleanor is dead, Arthur. She's been dead for 3 years. This house isn't her shrine, and it's time you stopped acting like it is and let living people use the space." The room went dead silent. The insult hung in the warm air like toxic smoke. Something deep inside my sternum snapped cold and final. "Get out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "Both of you, your parents will never step foot in this house, and your time here is officially over." Before I could even process the disrespect echoing through my dining room, my own son stood up. Julian's chair scraped violently against the oak floorboards his mother had hand-waxed for nearly 4 decades. His face was flushed red, but it wasn't the red of shame. It was the bitter, defensive anger of a man who had completely surrendered his spine. "You know what, Dad? You're being incredibly selfish," Julian shouted, pointing an accusing finger at my face. "You've spent 39 years in this house. You had your life with Mom. But Mom is gone now, Dad. She's part of the past. And the second we try to build something for our future, you shut us down. Why does everything always have to be about you and your damn quiet?" He said it like I was the villain. The man who had mortgaged nothing, asked for no rent, given up his living room, tolerated the displacement of his wife's memory, and spent 2 years subsidizing their secret luxuries, called selfish by the son he had raised from infancy. I didn't even get the chance to speak. Vanessa's arm swept sideways in a sudden, violent arc. Her heavy, crystal-red wine glass launched across the table like a projectile. I didn't see it coming. I only felt the impact, a heavy, explosive crack directly against my left temple, right above my eyebrow. The crystal shattered into jagged shards, and instant heat flooded my forehead. Within seconds, thick, hot blood erupted from the gash, streaming down into my left eye, coating my cheek and dripping heavily onto the white linen tablecloth Eleanor had bought at a craft fair in Galena 20 years ago. For 3 horrifying seconds, nobody moved. The copper stench of my own blood filled my nostrils. Then Julian, my own flesh and blood, made his choice. He didn't rush to my side. He didn't grab a napkin to staunch the bleeding. He didn't even ask if I was conscious. Instead, he stepped over the broken glass, threw his arms around Vanessa, and pulled her against his chest as she began to hyperventilate. Then he looked over his wife's shoulder at my blood-soaked face and snarled, "Look what you did, Dad. Look what you pushed her to do. You just couldn't leave it alone." I sat there in silence, feeling the warm blood soak into the collar of my Sunday shirt. In that singular, terrifying moment, the last lingering thread of paternal affection snapped inside me. Julian hadn't just taken his wife's side. He had chosen to be an accomplice to my abuse. I didn't yell. I didn't cry out. I stood up slowly, grabbed the clean linen kitchen towel off the counter, pressed it firmly against my throbbing forehead, picked up my car keys from the foyer hook, and walked out the front door into the chilly April air. I drove myself 11 minutes down Washington Street to Edward Hospital in Naperville. I remember every red light, the wet towel sticking to my open wound, my hands steady on the steering wheel. The ear triage nurse took one look at my bloodied face and rushed me straight back to an exam room. As the doctor prepped the local anesthetic to place 6 deep sutures across my brow, he asked gently, "Mr. Vance, we need to know officially how this laceration occurred." I didn't protect them. I didn't lie. I laid out every single detail, word for word. Under Illinois domestic violence laws, medical staff are mandated reporters. While the doctor threaded the black sutures through my skin, the nurse was already at the desk dialing the Naperville Police Department to file an official felony assault report. Sitting on the crinkling paper of the hospital bed, holding an ice pack against my swollen eye, I pulled out my smartphone. I opened a text thread with Harrison Thorne, my family attorney who had handled Eleanor's estate and knew the exact layout of my properties. "Harrison," I typed with a steady hand. "I am currently at Edward Hospital ER. Vanessa threw a heavy crystal wine glass at my head during Easter dinner. I have 6 stitches and an official police report filed. Julian blamed me and covered for her. I need an emergency protection order filed at the DuPage County Courthouse the minute it opens tomorrow, along with formal emergency eviction notices for both of them. I am done being patient." Then, as the numbing medicine began to throb, a crucial realization hit me. 6 months ago, concerned about package thefts along Oak Street, I had quietly installed a discreet high-definition security camera on the crown molding in the dining room, painted to blend into the trim. It recorded continuously to a cloud server. I logged into the app on my phone, scrolled back to 2:15 p.m. and pressed play. There it was. Crystal clear 4K video with crisp, unedited audio. The camera caught everything. Vanessa drafting her fake lease, her screaming that Eleanor was dead, Julian towering over me calling me selfish, Vanessa hurling the wine glass directly at my temple, and Julian comforting the assailant while stepping over my blood on the floor. I downloaded the raw video file and forwarded it directly to Harrison Thorne's secure email portal with a simple caption. Exhibit A. "The evidence is absolute," Harrison replied within 2 minutes. "Got the file, Arthur. This isn't just an eviction anymore. This is aggravated domestic battery with a deadly weapon. Stay in a hotel tonight. By 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, their entire world is coming down. By 5:30 on Monday morning, the dawn light was just beginning to cut through the heavy gray fog lingering over Oak Street. I sat in a wooden rocking chair on my front porch, wrapped in a thick wool cardigan, holding a hot mug of black coffee in my hands. A fresh white bandage was taped securely over the 6 stitches across my left eyebrow, throbbing with a dull, steady ache. I hadn't slept a single wink at the downtown hotel Harrison Thorne had booked for me. I had returned home at 4 in the morning, stepped around the dried bloodstains still dark against the hardwood floor, and moved out to the porch to wait for justice. Precisely at 6 a.m., the quiet suburban morning shattered. 3 dark blue Naperville Police Department cruisers pulled into my driveway in tight formation, their red and blue emergency lights flashing silently against the cream-colored siding of my Colonial. Accompanying them was a marked DuPage County Sheriff's unit carrying an emergency protection order signed by a judge less than 30 minutes prior. Harrison Thorne had worked through the night, presenting the judge with my hospital record, the police statement, and the undeniable 4K security video of the wine glass impact. The police officers didn't knock politely. The lead sergeant stepped onto the porch, gave me a brief, respectful nod, and rang the front doorbell with hard, rhythmic strikes. A minute later, Julian opened the front door wearing only his sweatpants, rubbing his bleary eyes in confusion. His sleepy expression dissolved into sheer terror in about 2 seconds flat as 4 armed officers stepped up to the threshold. "Vanessa Vance?" the sergeant demanded, his voice crisp and booming across the quiet neighborhood. Before Julian could even formulate a lie, Vanessa appeared in the foyer wearing a silk bathrobe, her hair messy and her mascara still smudged from the day before. The lead officer stepped inside, produced a set of steel handcuffs, and read her Miranda rights in a flat clinical tone right there under the entryway chandelier. "Vanessa Vance, you are under arrest for aggravated domestic battery with a deadly weapon," the sergeant announced, pulling her hands behind her back and snapping the steel cuffs onto her wrists. Vanessa gasped, bursting into frantic, hysterical tears. "Julian, do something! Tell them it was an accident. Arthur, tell them." Julian went completely white, stuttering helplessly as the deputy handed him a legal document. "Sir, this is a court-issued emergency protection order," the deputy told Julian coldly. "Your wife is barred from entering or coming within 500 feet of this property, effective immediately. You have exactly 10 minutes to gather her essential prescription medications and a duffel bag of clothes. If she steps back on this dirt, she will be remanded without bail." 10 minutes. That was all the time my son was given. I watched from my porch chair as Julian sprinted frantically up and down the stairs, crashing around the bedrooms, throwing random sweaters and pants into a canvas bag, sweating and trembling like a man who had woken up to find his house swallowed by a sinkhole. Down on the sidewalk, the commotion had drawn the neighborhood awake. Porch lights flicked on down the block. Mrs. Gable across the street stepped out in her bathrobe, arms crossed, staring in utter shock as 2 officers escorted a sobbing Vanessa down my front steps in handcuffs. When the deputy loaded Vanessa into the back of the cruiser and slammed the door, Julian ran out to the driveway barefoot, clutching the canvas bag, his face contorted in pure rage. He turned around and glared up at me on the porch. "Are you happy now, Dad?" Julian shrieked, his voice cracking across the quiet suburban street, loud enough to ring off the trees. "You set her up. You called the cops on your own family over a stupid argument. You're a cold, selfish old man, and you've completely destroyed this family." I didn't answer him. I didn't raise my voice. I simply took a slow sip of my hot coffee, looked my son dead in the eye through my bandaged brow, and watched the cruiser pull away down Oak Street with his wife in the back seat. By Tuesday afternoon, Julian attempted one last childish power play. Acting out of spite, he rented a small cargo van to move their clothes, but he deliberately left behind all their heavy furniture, massive oak dressers, and a mountain of stacked storage boxes cluttering my garage. He sent me a cold text message. "We'll get the rest of our property when we find a bigger place. Touch any of our boxes and I'll sue you for property destruction." I didn't argue. I forwarded the text directly to my attorney. Within 2 hours, Harrison Thorne issued a formal legal addendum directly to Julian's email and process server. The notice was brutal in its clarity. All personal property remaining on the premises of Oak Street after Friday at 5 p.m. will be deemed legally abandoned. A commercial waste management dumpster will be delivered to the driveway at 5:01 p.m. and all abandoned items will be hauled to the county landfill at the tenant's sole expense. That legal hammer sent Julian into an absolute panic. By Thursday morning, he was forced to drag his father-in-law, Mr. Larry, bad knee and all, out to my garage in a pouring rainstorm, frantically hauling heavy boxes into a rented utility trailer. They couldn't fit half of it into their temporary shelter, forcing them to drain hundreds of dollars from their dwindling cash reserves on a last-minute commercial storage unit. By Friday morning, the final lethal blow caught up to Vanessa from an entirely different direction. Every Friday, The Naperville Sun publishes the official municipal police blotter online. Right at the top of the felony arrest log was Vanessa's full name, her age, and her high-resolution booking mugshot, showing her disheveled hair, red eyes, and the stark charge listed in black and white. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. A senior partner at the downtown Chicago digital marketing firm where Vanessa worked happened to live in DuPage County and saw the public blotter over breakfast. By 9 a.m. Friday, before Vanessa could even draft a fake excuse for missing work, the agency's HR department sent her a formal termination letter. She was summarily fired for severe ethical violations and gross professional misconduct, stripped of her salary and benefits without severance. In less than 5 days, her arrogance had cost her her freedom, her reputation, her home, and her career. And the machine I had set in motion was only just beginning to roll. By Sunday morning, a week after that bloody Easter dinner, the storm shifted from the legal courts to the court of family opinion. Julian had gone running to every relative who shared our bloodline, spinning a pathetic, weaponized narrative of an unhinged, heartless father who had thrown his own son and daughter-in-law out onto the street over a minor household disagreement. My phone began buzzing relentlessly on my nightstand at 7 in the morning. My older sister, Maureen, called first, her voice dripping with self-righteous fury. "Arthur Vance, how could you do this to your own flesh and blood?" she demanded, barely taking a breath. "Julian says you called the SWAT team on Vanessa over a broken dinner glass. Eleanor would be rolling in her grave if she saw how cruel you've become. She used my dead wife's name like a dagger, aiming straight for the heart. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself on the call. I simply hung up, took a deep breath, and opened a text messaging application on my phone. I created a new group chat. I added every single relative who had called, texted, or passed judgment over the last 48 hours. Sister Maureen, Cousin Dave, Aunt Clara, and 6 others. I didn't write an essay. I didn't plead for sympathy. Instead, I uploaded 4 silent files directly into the thread. First, the unedited 4K security video clip from my dining room camera, clearly showing Vanessa screaming that Eleanor was dead, hurling the heavy crystal wine glass directly at my temple, and Julian stepping over my blood to comfort her. Second, the high-resolution photo the ER nurse took at Edward Hospital before stitching me up, showing thick crimson blood cascading down my face, soaking my collar, and dripping onto Eleanor's Galeafly market tablecloth. Third, a PDF scan of my official hospital discharge papers listing 6 facial sutures resulting from blunt force trauma, alongside the certified Naperville police assault report. And fourth, right beneath the files, I typed one single cold sentence. Julian stood over me while I bled onto his mother's hand-waxed floorboards, looked at my split forehead, and told me I drove his wife to do it. If any of you believe I am being cruel, my front door is unlocked, and you are more than welcome to invite both of them and her parents into your own spare bedrooms today. Do not call this number again. I muted the group thread and set my phone face down on the kitchen counter. 6 hours later, my sister Maureen called back. When I picked up, her voice was tiny, trembling, completely stripped of its earlier self-righteous anger. "Arthur, oh God, Arthur, I didn't know. Julian lied to us. I am so sorry." I didn't save her voicemail. I deleted it without a word. The family group chat went dead quiet. Not a single cousin, aunt, or sibling posted another message in Julian's defense. Blood in a high-definition photo and a certified police report speaks louder than any manipulative story a spoiled son can spin. While my home returned to its quiet dignity, the harsh reality of the outside world descended upon Julian and Vanessa like a sledgehammer. Stripped of Vanessa's corporate salary, burdened with thousands of dollars in criminal defense retainer fees, and possessing zero savings due to their secret luxury spending, they were forced into emergency housing. They rented a cramped 40-year-old one-bedroom apartment sitting directly above a noisy 24-hour commercial laundromat off Route 59. The place had thin walls, rusted metal window frames, and a permanent, suffocating stench of industrial bleach and damp exhaust fumes. To make matters worse, Vanessa's parents, Mr. Larry and his wife, were officially evicted from their Wheaton apartment that same week. With nowhere else to go and no money left, they had no choice but to move into that tiny one-bedroom apartment with Julian and Vanessa. 4 full-grown, resentful adults squeezed into a 700-square-foot box with one small bathroom. Vanessa finally got her ultimate wish. Her parents were living under the exact same roof as her, just not the spacious 4-bedroom colonial on Oak Street she had tried to steal. 3 weeks after they moved out, I was driving my truck back from the hardware store down Route 59. As I approached the traffic light near the commercial strip, I glanced over at the gravel parking lot beside the laundromat. There stood Julian. He was wearing a faded gray undershirt, his shoulders slumped, looking 10 pounds thinner and 10 years older than the son I remembered. He was standing on the cracked pavement beside a rusted plastic lawn chair, locked in a furious screaming match with his father-in-law, Larry. Larry was waving an electric utility bill in Julian's face, his mouth contorted in anger, while Vanessa stood in the doorway above them, shrieking down at both of them over the deafening hum of the laundromat exhaust fans. 4 adults, broke, exhausted, trapped in a nightmare of their own making, fighting over power bills in a commercial parking lot. I held the steering wheel with steady hands. I didn't slow down. I didn't honk my horn. I didn't feel a surge of anger, nor did I feel a drop of pity. I simply stepped on the gas pedal, looked straight ahead at the open Illinois road, and drove right past them. They had chosen their path, and for the first time in my life, I was letting them walk it all the way to the end. By early June, the warm Midwestern summer sun had completely transformed Oak Street. The cool, damp rains of spring faded away, giving way to bright morning sunlight that streamed unhindered through my living room windows. The heavy, oppressive tension that had hung over this house for 16 long months evaporated into thin air, leaving behind a stillness that no longer felt lonely, but deeply, profoundly peaceful. The Saturday morning after the family group chat went quiet, I spent the entire afternoon restoring my home to its rightful dignity. I climbed up into the attic, brought down the heavy cardboard box Vanessa had hidden away, and carefully unpacked Eleanor's delicate ceramic angel figurines. One by one, I wiped the dust from their painted porcelain wings and set them back along the dark wood of the fireplace mantel, exactly where they had rested for 20 years. I walked into the kitchen, reclaimed my heavy cast iron skillets, and moved them back up to the middle shelves where my hip didn't ache to reach them. And from the very back corner of the pantry, I pulled out my favorite coffee mug, the one Eleanor had bought me at that craft fair in Galena, with its faded blue glaze and the slight chip along the rim that she always said gave it character. I washed it, filled it with hot black coffee, and walked out onto the front porch, down along the wooden porch railing. The hydrangeas Eleanor had planted 39 years ago were in full, radiant bloom. Huge, heavy clusters of vibrant blue petals swayed gently in the summer breeze, stubborn and beautiful, completely untouched by the storm that had passed through this yard. As I sat in my wooden rocking chair, listening to the quiet rustle of the oak trees and the chirping of robins in the yard, I inhaled the rich aroma of my coffee and felt a soothing warmth spread through my chest. The house belonged to Eleanor and me once again. The air was clean, the counters were mine, and no one was telling me I salted my pasta water wrong, or that my late wife's memory was just clutter. 6 weeks after that fateful Easter dinner, on a quiet Thursday evening in mid-July, I was sitting on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon when my phone buzzed on the small side table. It was a text message from Julian. His number wasn't blocked yet. A small part of me had left that door unlocked just to see if reality would ever wake him up, Dad. The message read, the words practically trembling on the screen. We are drowning out here. Rent is due on Friday and our bank accounts are completely empty. The criminal defense lawyers for Vanessa ate every single dollar we had left. Her mom is sick. The noise from the laundromat downstairs is driving us crazy, and there are 4 adults crammed into this tiny one-bedroom apartment with literally no space to breathe. We can't survive like this. Please, Dad, you have those 2 empty guest rooms sitting upstairs doing nothing. Just let us come home. I'm so sorry for everything. Please. I read the message twice. I set my phone down on my lap and looked out across the front lawn at the blooming blue hydrangeas, letting the summer breeze cool my face. My mind drifted back to that Easter table, to the sound of a crystal wine glass shattering against my temple, to the warm blood soaking into Eleanor's tablecloth, and to the bitter, hateful voice of my own son standing over my bleeding face, screaming that I was being selfish for wanting peace in my own home. Selfish. For 2 years, I had apologized for existing in my own house. I had allowed myself to be pushed around, marginalized, and insulted because I was terrified of being labeled a bad father. But standing on the other side of that nightmare, looking at my scar in the hallway mirror every morning, I finally understood the truth. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty, protecting your home isn't malice, and refusing to be a punching bag for ungrateful adults isn't something you apologize for. It's the highest form of self-respect. I picked up my phone. My fingers didn't tremble. My pulse didn't race. I typed back out my response slow and steady, without a single grain of anger or bitterness in my heart. You were right, Julian. I am being selfish, and I have never understood the absolute life-saving value of that word more clearly than I do right now. Good luck. I pressed send. Before the delivery confirmation even blinked on the screen, I tapped his contact profile, hit the red button, and blocked his phone number permanently. I blocked Vanessa's number, blocked her parents' numbers, and closed the application. I set the phone face down on the table, picked up my chipped blue mug, and took a long, slow sip of coffee. Up in the oak trees, the night birds were beginning their evening song. Downstairs in the kitchen, no air fryer was humming. Upstairs in the bedrooms, no intruders were measuring my walls to remodel over my grave. Just quiet. My quiet. The quiet I had worked 39 years to earn. Thank you so much for sitting with me today and listening to this story of Midwestern resilience, boundaries, and the quiet strength it takes to reclaim your life when the people you raise try to tear it down. If Arthur's journey touched your heart and reminded you of the irreplaceable value of self-respect, please take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. Leave a comment down below and let me know what city or state you're listening from today. I read every single one of your thoughts. Until next time, keep your boundaries firm, cherish the ones who truly love you, and take care of yourselves out there.